Yeah, thank you, Dr. Vihan Pai, for giving this opportunity to share my experience in qualitative risk methodology. Hello, everyone. Before I start, just a quick response. Am I audible there to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, till now, what we have seen that in this workshop that Dr. Avinish Tiwari has explained about what is the difference between qualitative and quantitative research methods, and Asha ma'am explained what are the different methods of data collections, like how we collect data in the field. In this session, we will talk about like how we will prepare the data and how we manage the data till our end product, like whether it is our dissertation or report or publication. I would like to share the screen on my presentation. Please respond if it is visible for everyone. Is my slide visible? So in this session, we talk about data preparation, how we develop codes and developing and coding processes, and then how we analyze the data, and what are the different approaches that qualitative researchers adopt to analyze the data, and then how we categorize the data and we develop concepts out of those categories. And at the end, it is the theory development. Before I delve into the details of the data preparation, all I would like to give a brief background of the research cycles, like how we accomplish our qualitative research in a cyclic manner. So till now, what we have seen that in the beginning, what Dr. Avnish was telling, that what is the different like how we start our qualitative research when we once thinking about the qualitative methods. It's the data. It starts from the design cycle. It starts with the research questions. Then we go for literature review, and then we see what are the different theories are applicable to those research questions, and then we develop our conceptual framework from literature review and research questions, and then we adopt a particular field of approach, and then we go for next step, that is ethnographic cycle. In ethnographic cycle, that is which Ashaman was explaining, that how we collect data. So in that we developed research instruments, like whether we will go for in-depth interview guide, or whether we will collect data through focus group discussions, and then what would be the different methods of recruiting participants, and then we collect data, and then we make the inferences out of those data to our analysis. And now I will come to this my presentation, that is analytical cycle. Like after collection of data, how we analyze the data. So it involves that, like we start from the developing codes, and then we describe it, and then we compare with different codes, and then we categorize and conceptualize, and then we develop theory out of it. And this analytical cycle again can feed the our design cycle, whether our this theory is explaining what we have developed in the beginning, like the conceptual framework, or how our conceptual framework is being applied in our analytical cycle. So since this is, I would like this session to be very interactive. So I request all the participants to ask questions or any doubt whenever you feel that this is, you need a little explanation. So yes, you are free to ask. Before going to the data preparation, I would like to give a brief like background of what type of qualitative data we have. As we already know that qualitative data are all the data that are in the textual format, right? Whether we collect it through IDI, that is in-depth interview guide, or through FGDs. In addition to that, we also consider secondary data like clinical records or field notes or diaries, or even newspaper report as a source of secondary data for qualitative evidence. And in a nutshell, we can say any form of textual information can be considered as qualitative data, right? And then once we are done with our data collections. We have recorded it. So then how we analyze it? The first step is preparation. So we transcribe and translate. Suppose we conducted a research on the perceptions of or Ashtanga on the impact on metabolism. So we collected data of different participants who practice Ashtanga and they have their certain impact on it, right? So generally in qualitative methods, we avoid like, impact or examining on assessment, but these are all about perceptions, thought, belief, practices, and certain meaning attached to a certain practices or phenomenon or the lived experiences, we can say. So, suppose we have one record of one interview, so we transcribe it. If the interview is in English language, then it's okay, we will translate, like we will transcribe as it is. But if we conduct interviews in regional languages or vernacular language, so we have to translate it again. So it depends on the nature of research and the person who have interviewed and what are the subpopulation or the population of the study. So if it is in any language like Hindi, so we have to transcribe first and then translate it. And we have to keep in mind that there should be, there should not be any loose of essential meaning of those transcriptions from particular language to another language. So in the process of transcription and translation, we retain the colloquial terms, particularly which are significant on topic. Like if we are using certain local terms, so which cannot be explained in English or in a proper way. So what we do, we retain those terms to make it more relevant for the people to understand it, or more bringing the enriched perceptions of those things. And that's why we say we generally transcribe it in a verbatim manner, and we should not summarize the recorded data. Like what we listen it, we transcribe it, and we should not summarize in the sense that okay, we will only focus only those things but a participant has explained, or there's a questions that you have in your individual guide or coursework guide. So it's not about the researcher's perceptions of transcribing things or the adapting only or noting only those things which the researchers think to note, but it's the other way around. Like whatever the participants gets into explain, and you transcribe it verbatim. Don't lose or don't miss any sentence or any word, considering it as less important for your research, because at this stage we never know that what is important and what is not. And then we also keep in mind that when we translate the data or transcribe it, we anonymize the data, that we take out the identity information of the participants, because sometimes you also start from like tell me something about yourself, first question of any interview. So the person might have responded like, my name is this, and I'm from this area, my parents are this, and so. So for those things, what we do, we generally remove from the text, and we keep it in separate file so that we can make references for those participants. And of course, we take special care of the working in teams, because when we say that the qualitative data is a very time-consuming process, so we take help of the research assistants. So a person who has conducted interview may not be involved in transcribing or translating the data. So what we do, we can also hire a person for transcribing separately or translating the data. But researchers should keep in mind that there should not be any loss of information or the meaning of the information in the whole process of transcriptions and translations. Yeah, so coming to the next step, once we have prepared our textual format of data from audio to text format, and we start analyzing it. We can do it manually, or even we can do it in software. So I'll come later that how we do manually and how we do in software. In the next session, we'll try to do it in a practical way, like we practice in Atlas TI software, like how to code the data. The next stage is the development code from the text. Suppose we have one transcript of So we go thoroughly of the data, like we start from the beginning, we read it, and then we find the idea or opinion or topic of discussions. That these are like the basic unit of it. Like measuring unit is one sentence. It can be a word, even a phrase, or even a sentence, or a few sentences. So we select particular section and we give a term that we say it's code. Okay? That section of or a paragraph can be an idea or any opinion or a group of words. So we code it based on our requirements. So there are two types of codes generally we create when we analyze the data. One is deductive codes and other is inductive codes. Deductive codes are those codes which we develop from the interview guide or literature, or when we conduct interviews, or we take some suggestions from the experts or stakeholders who already are working in this field. So when we develop the research questions or the interview guide, we have certain questions. So when the code is referring something which already been asked by the interviewer, so that code we call as deductive code. Whereas the inductive code refers to those codes where those phrases which we code came from the participant's view, which has not been asked by the researcher. So it's the opinion of the participants, opinion of the interview. So there is a term called in vivo code. It means that there is a certain code which we put under the in vivo category, which are very significant or culturally attached to it. There is certain, it can be used as a metaphor, or it can be used as a colloquial term which has its particular meaning, which cannot be explained in other way. So we keep it in vivo codes. And why do we code it? Like the basic purpose of coding is to get different range of issues in the data. Like from when we go through the data, when we read it, we can get a different ideas, different opinion. So just to make it more manageable, we code it. To understand the meaning, what are the meaning attached to particular word that the participants are explaining, right? And then we easily locate those codes when we analyze the data. It's for the better management of the researcher. And what are the different strategies for deductive codes development? That we develop deductive codes from the interview guide, as I was explaining in the previous slide. And we also take those codes from the conceptual framework, right? From the research literature and the professionals. And as I was mentioning, that the inductive code is generally developed from the text, that has been explained by the participants. And we try to explore the underlying concepts within those terms, or within those ideas or the responses that we get from the participants. And whether the participants are stick to the questions, or they are bringing new ideas into the questions. Like if we ask, like, do you think that yoga can be very beneficial for your metabolic system? So many participants might have different opinions. So the participants might respond like, yes, I think it's very important because it has improved my metabolic system, and it is a general statement, right? But one says that it's not only about metabolic system; it's also about our family systems. Like it has our traditional value. Yoga is our way of life. So we believe in that and we practice it. It's not because of our health, or physical health, or mental health, but it's also because of our satisfaction, because of our traditional culture that we always practice it. So it has a different meaning to it, right? So to explore those things, we use this in vivo codes. Or sometimes we also use in a metaphoric way, because there are many, in conversations we speak certain things which cannot be explained in a direct manner. Like one of the interviews, one of the studies I was conducting in Bangladesh, Dhaka, where I was explaining about what are the difficulties older adults face when they go out for accessing different modes of transport, but particularly the public transport in Dhaka city. So the So people, we consider it as elderly, but what they call is Murupi. It's a term which is culturally significant for them. They are not elderly. Elderly is a term which is, people say it's okay. Any person can, with above 60 is elderly. But when we say Murupi, it means that the person is a respected person in society who is has certain authority in society and who has role in decision making. So Murubi is similar to the older person or elderly, but it still has a different meaning to it. So in those terms, we categorize as inductive codes. And while we develop the codes, we try to keep balance between the inductive codes and deductive codes. That it should not be like that. We should not develop too many codes from the deductive way. But we also try to bring out new things or bring out new codes, because the purpose of qualitative research is to explore new things in our research. So that's why the first criteria to develop code is to go through the text, and we have to relate it with the conceptual framework. And when we see that certain terms are coming up, we have to turn those in inductive codes. After completing the coding of the text, all the text, whether it is 30 participants or 50 participants, we complete the coding process and then we make a code book of it, so that we can make reference to what are the. It's again about the data management, because when we do manually, we cannot keep in mind everything in mind. Like if suppose there are 60 participants and there were many the codes. So for that, to make it more clear and more so that we can manage it in a better way, we make code book in Excel sheet where we give like the overview of the course. What's the definition of that particular code? When we select certain section of a paragraph, we give name of it a code, but we have to explain what is that code, and we have to define it based on the context of that that transcriptions. And then it also helps to guide to coding, because we always try to look into the different codes and different quotations. For example, we select certain sections. This becomes the unit, that is the meaning unit, which is the quotations. So when we analyze in later stage, we cannot relate it everything on what quotation is under what code and what code is under category. It would be very difficult to remember. So the code book gives easy guide, becomes easy guide for us to relate things. And yes, this is the data analysis process, that how we develop the inductive codes. At first, we read the text, we make the unit, like whether it's a sentence or a paragraph or a phrases or a few words. We select it as the quotations. We consider it as quotations, and from the quotations we develop a code, and from code we make categories. Those codes similar to each other, we make a group of those codes and term as category. And once we develop the category, the upper level of category is the concept, because we develop concept from the categories. A single code can also be used for developing a concept, but it depends on the number of quotations that are coming out, or the repetitions of the answer from the participants, whether all the participants are explaining the same thing, or how they consider it in their everyday life. So it depends on the frequency of statements by the participants. So again, it depends on the researcher, how a researcher is developing a concept out of a code or a category. Yes, since Asham was also explaining that there are many ways to analyze the data. So generally, we say it's in a qualitative methods. We have content analysis. It's the process of where we see the frequency of it, like the presence of certain words or some object or a concept in particular text. Suppose we are looking for a content in a newspaper, like from last 1 year, like yoga, the word yoga in everyday life. So we take a newspaper of last 1 month and then we analyze it. We select how many times or certain words, any words or any subject. It depends on the nature of work or the researchers has taken up that particular topic, and then we analyze it. So basically it's based on the content that we are looking for. Similarly, for the thematic analysis, what we do from the interview, we get the speaker's perspective, of the experiences of their views, their opinions, and we make different themes out of it. Like we make code group, and code groups can be a theme. Even a code can become a theme based on the requirement of the research. And then again, it is the narrative analysis. It's an approach where we see from the word itself, it's the narration of it, like how people tell stories and how the person, the participants, are telling the story. And you have to also observe the body language of participants and what are the meaning of those stories to the lives of those participants. So this is the narrative analysis. And similarly, if there is another analysis process we call is discourse analysis, where we analyze the language of a particular context, whether in social context or political field. We generally focus on the language, the terms or the terminology that are being being prevalent in the society. So we try to explore those things. For example, in one of the studies where we were trying to explore the health behavior, the sexual health behavior of the migrant labor in Goa. So they say sometimes they also use condoms, but for condom they don't use the word condom. They say it's the topi. So it's a term which we generally don't know from outside. So it's the context where we have to explore those things and then use it in our research. Similarly, with IPA, that is interpreted phenomenological analysis, where we try to explain people's personal experience of a particular phenomenon, where we say we explain things in how the mechanism of the occurring of certain phenomena. We explain one by one, step by step. It's not about developing thematic approach. It's in IPA we generally explain it in a chronological order sometimes, so that we can have a better understanding of the chain process. And another analysis is grounded theory analysis, where we try to create a new theory out of data, quantitative data. So though it's a very rigorous process, though ultimate product of qualitative research to develop a new theory, that is we call it grounded theory. Grounded theory means a theory which we develop from the ground itself. The ground means from the interviews, from the participants' perceptions and views. There is certain checklist for evaluate the grounded theory that I will explain later. And coming to the process, that how we can explain the analysis process in a cyclical manner. Like as I was mentioning that we have data, a textual format, and then we describe it. We describe it and we make it code of it, and then we classify it. Classify means we make the group of those codes, and we try to connect each code with based on the requirements, in the sense that we are trying to develop a concept. It means that we can compare two or multiple codes, or sometimes you also merge two different codes to develop a concept, or then we after connecting we make an account of those things. So we call it as a thick description. It means that when we describe the data, there is a certain process within this data. We describe it, we classify it, and then we connect with different codes, and then we make account of those data. So as I was mentioning, that we develop thick descriptions by comparison of different subgroups and diagraming the code families. Code family is a code group. It's synonymously used as code groups. Code groups is the combination of different codes. And then we develop the concepts, and then after that we develop the theory. So what is thick description? Thick description means that it forms the foundation of qualitative analysis, because it's not only about the descriptions of the codes that you have developed, it also includes your observations, the body language of the participants, the environment, and the different anecdotes that you have gone through. It's the description of your research of a particular code, which also include or also contrast with the different codes. So that's why we like to thick descriptions or the condensed measuring unit, right? And it provides a rich details of it. It doesn't only focus on a particular idea. It also explains different dimensions of a particular topic. And it's a very powerful and engaging accounts of events because it will give the lived experiences. You can explain it through that in a thick description. We can see it. Like, if a reader reads it, you can relate to that particular context. And then we compare different subgroup or the codes because we try to bring different range of experiences of the participants. It also try to identify the patterns of how these codes are related and how one person's statements or views are associated with other person's statements or views. And then, as I was mentioning, the description of code is the identifying issues, whereas the comparison is the refining issues, where we also bring different dimensions to it. And then we categorize it. Like categories, like as I was mentioning, that we take similar codes and similar attributes and make a broader idea, and we categorize under certain group because it helps to bring all the codes or the ideas into certain folder. Because we cannot say that all the codes, like for 30 interviews, you might have 100. So 100 codes cannot be the 100 ideas or concepts. So we bring together the similar codes into one group. So we call code group or code family, or we categorize it under certain based on certain similarities or common attributes. And yes, the biggest question is that how many categories we should develop while analyzing the data. But of course, it depends on the saturation. Again, as Ashana was saying, that saturation is a very vague term in qualitative methods because we can't explain what is saturation. Because like even after conducting interviews, when you go for further interviews, you may have new ideas or new perceptions about it. So similarly, when we analyze the data, when we develop the categories and code groups, we generally find that suppose there are 100 codes. So we for each group we take 15 or 16 or even 5 or 10, depends on similarity of codes. We develop 20 code groups. So, and again, it's very flexible. It doesn't mean that once you have developed code groups, 20 code groups, you cannot change it or you should not change it. Things like that. You can always make make cross connections, or even you can break the code group and you can make a new code group for that. And we will try. We learn this in LSTS software, how we develop code, and then code category or code. Code family of code group, and how we develop concept out of those code categories. So here, this is the example of like how we develop the category level from the data. So suppose we this is the present the study represents the study of accessing the healthcare facilities. So we have coded the data. So suppose the first groups of code are the service locations. So the participant says the location of the service provider is important for to access the different modes of transport. And then there's opening times of the health facility center, and then travel time from home to health center, and then whether they get different modes of, or the acceptable and accessible modes of transport, because they have the physical ability to access those transports. So these are group of codes. These are the codes that we can group together based on a common attribute that is access. And the category level, we term it as a physical access. Similarly, in the other group of codes where we see that the participants have also explained about the service cost, and then the registration fees and the travel costs and the cost of drugs and the low income or the poverty or the income of household. So it refers to the money or the monetary factors of the participants to access health facilities. So we term it as an economic barrier to access health facilities. Similarly, we have developed the cognitive barrier, social barrier, and cultural order. So it depends on the different types of code that developed. So it's not necessary that all the dimensions will be physical, social, cognitive, and cultural. It depends on the nature of codes that have been developed, and based on codes, we have to develop the categories. In between, we have to see what are the common attributes among those codes. And then we see how to develop the theory. First, I hope you remember the analytical cycle. Out of 3 cycles, the last cycle is analytical cycle, which means first we have design cycle, then ethnographic cycle, and then analytical. So we have to follow all the tasks of analysis, like the data preparations, data analysis, and then developing code categories and conceptualizing our idea, and then we develop the theory. When we develop theory, we have to identify the explicit reasons. Based on reasons, why the particular idea we consider can be a theory. You have to give solid or valid reasons for that. And you also have to compare the explanations. So why that when you are explaining different codes, we have to compare with different codes. Even sometimes different studies, like in the next topic, like explain outliers, you also have to explain outliers. It means that you also have to see what others have worked on that and how it relates to your study. That it's not only based on your study that the codes can be used for developing theory, but there might be similar studies that have been already been done. So what are the different dimensions of things and ideas are also existed. Similar studies have been done. So you need to explain to the outliers. And then you also need to explain the negative cases, like what are the negative cases have been experienced by the researcher, and then you have to explain that why, what are the drawbacks of those codes, or how, if you are developing this as a grounded theory, so what are the negative cases that you have been found in it. So you have to explain that this is not a perfect thing. Also, there is some lacking in it. So those can be considered as the limitations of the theory. And of course, you relate it with the conceptual framework, whether the conceptual framework is reflected in it, or whether the new theory is explaining or addressing your conceptual framework. So it's a two-way process. And then you see whether you have used a deductive logic. So since in conceptual framework we have different ideas, and see if all the ideas have come into the theory, or whether the theory is explaining the ideas back in the conceptual framework, right? And how we evaluate the qualitative analysis, data analysis. First, we have to see whether when we are transcribing it, so whether it was in a verbatim manner, and when other data preparation tasks were described. Like description means different ranging issues. And then with the code development and coding description, how the coding process was done. We have to explain that. And again, we have to see whether the detective code, detective and inductive techniques were used to develop codes. And then we also have, it should not only mention about the descriptions, it should go to the explanation level. Explanation means the one step ahead of descriptions, where we include the researcher's explanation, researcher's perceptions, and whether the observation or the different the integrative issues associated with it. Suppose we have gone to ask to conduct interview for a person who is above 60 years old in the park, who joins in a yoga group in the morning. So he explains that why he comes in the morning, right? So out of that, you describe it like the person named this, Ramesh comes in the morning, age this, but when you see when we conduct the interviews, we also observe other things, like how he works, how he interacts with other people. Like it's not because from the interviews we may not get everything what we observe. So there are some associated things that we also need to explain in our analysis process. So that we call explanations. Yes. So till now, what we have seen that whether the data analysis can be possible manually or needs software everything. It's possible manually we can do it, but using software gives you advantage that you can manage it in a better way. You can have certain folder where you click it and all the quotations will come under it. But manually, if you're doing it manually, you cannot remember every quotations or on the quotes where it is there in certain text. For example, if you have to give example from the quote, you have to bring quotations, but you may not remember. So you have to go through all the transcripts manually to look into where it is. But where if you have done it in software, you click it in a particular quote, you will get all the quotations under that quote. So it gives it saves you time, and it also helps to manage data in a better manner. Yeah. So yeah. So I'm until here I will stop regarding this theoretical part of this session. So I would like the participants to ask questions about it, and please don't hesitate to ask at any stage if you think that there was need to explain more or you have doubt, please ask.